The government of India announced the Startup India Seed Fund scheme to be able to provide funding to some early stage startups who may not be eligible to raise funds from VCs owing to their early stage or not having a proof of concept. Further, banks don't really lend without having assets backed as securities. This scheme aims to plug the gap. Understanding this better now. So, if you're a startup who needs funds in its early stage, how do you define that? If you're not older than 2 years and are registered as a private limited or a partnership or an LLP, and you need funds for proof of concept, for development of your prototype, for product testing, and understanding or defining your go-to-market strategy, then this scheme applies to you. The funding available through this scheme is of two forms. One is in the form of a grant available to a startup of up to 20 lakh rupees for developing the proof of concept, developing the prototype, running product trials, and defining the go-to-market strategy. The second form of funding available is up to 50 lakhs per startup, which is in the form of a convertible debt. So you can either repay that debt over a total term, which may extend up to 5 years with a moratorium of the first 12 months, or you can also choose to convert it to equity at a later stage. Now, how will this entire amount be dispersed and what is going to be the mechanism around this? So if you're a registered startup on the Startup India website, you will go to seedfund.startupindia.gov.in. This is the URL for this particular scheme. You will go to apply as a startup. Now this amount is only going to be dispersed through incubators which are registered with the Startup India scheme to make these disbursements under the scheme. So you will have the option to select in preferential order 3 incubators, and once an incubator bases your application, it's an online application, bases your application, if an incubator selects you among its pool of startups to whom it would want to incubate and mentor towards this scheme, after that, it's the incubator's responsibility to receive those funds. Certain incubators will also be applying as part of this scheme. These incubators will have to be minimum 2 to 3 years old, depending on a number of other criteria applicable to them. These incubators will then receive those funds from the scheme and disperse them to the startups. Now, the startups don't necessarily have to be physically present at the incubators. Owing to the current scenario, these incubators should at least be virtually mentoring these startups and ensuring that certain milestones are achieved in the process. So the entire amount of 20 lakh is not going to be dispersed to a startup right away. It will be given in the form of certain milestones being achieved, such as a proof of concept being developed. Then a prototype has to be developed. Then you need money for product testing. And of course, you need some more funds to figure out whether this product is commercially feasible or not. The charges for lawyers or consultants to go through this paperwork is to be borne by the startups themselves. However, having a lawyer on board is not a mandatory requirement. So it is only for the comfort of the founders of the startup to know whether they want a professional on board to help them with the paperwork and assist them with understanding of what they're signing is correct or not. The founders who've been funded through these schemes will also have to engage in conversations and virtual meeting sessions with the incubator every 15 to 30 days to give them an update on what has been happening with the funds. At the end of the scheme, they will of course also have to, and at the end of utilization of the entire funds, they will have to give a detailed report on how the funds have to be utilized, which will of course require to be audited. If God forbid the startup fails, there are certain conditions with respect to how, of course, the money cannot be returned to the government, but certain paperwork will have to be completed, such as utilization certificate for how these funds have been used, which may also require a sign off by the incubator. The incubators, of course, to do this will also be given a management fee of 5%. It's a great scheme. The application is open throughout the year. So I would urge people who are actually looking to raise funds for their technology based startups. That's an important criterion for everyone to know, that there should be an element of technology in your startup idea to be eligible for these kind of funds, and these funds can be used specifically for these milestones as mentioned in the scheme, and not for creating any other kind of facilities, neither for the startups nor for the incubators. Go to seedfund.startupindia.gov.in to read more about it. The application is also online. Specifically look up the FAQs page, which will answer most of your questions.